TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Good afternoon. This is TNCRadio.LIVE, and this is the Truckers Network Radio Show with your host, Shelley Johnson.
Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that. Yes, this is the Truckers Network Radio Show on TNCRadio.LIVE. We're all about the news, talk, information, and entertainment that drivers want to hear. As many truckers know, highways are really bad in many parts of the country, riddled with potholes and rough pavement, along with bridges that are on the brink of falling down. The designed for the volume of traffic that it handles today, and road repairs and improvements have gotten duct tape solutions with temporary fixes. One of the problems is the highway system is dependent on user fees. When the freeways were built under a highway trust fund under President Eisenhower, and fee structures haven't really changed much since the 1990s. As drivers know, traffic flow and gridlock are way too common, along with roads and bridges that are simply unsafe. With us today is Jennifer Clymer, who's co-producer of the documentary Be Prepared to Stop. That explores our national highway system and transportation predicament. Welcome, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
Thank you, Shelley, and thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be with you.
If you wouldn't mind.
This is a little devastating because we had the opportunity to talk for a few minutes before we went live on the air. And as soon as we went live, the internet connection started getting spotty. So I'm assuming that you just said, tell us a little bit about the documentary.
I believe she did, Jennifer, yes, because I think we may have temporarily lost Shelley. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about the documentary and how the idea came to be?
Sure. So the documentary is called Be Prepared to Stop. It's available now for free on YouTube. You can find it at youtube.com /be prepared to stop, or you can just search for it on YouTube. The way that the idea for the documentary got started, I was in Washington, D.C. with a film festival for a different short documentary that I had executive produced. And just sitting in the lobby waiting for my hotel room to be cleaned for a little bit of an early check-in. And I started talking to a couple of people that were hanging out in the lobby, and they were checking out. They were on their way. And the one gentleman was just, casual about, what are you doing? And said, oh, there's this great film festival for documentaries. And I'm in from Los Angeles. Where are you from? And he said, Arkansas. I'm like, oh, all right. What do you do there? And he said, oh, I'm in trucking. I said, oh, I love truck drivers. He lost the control of his jaw, just fell to the table. And he picked it back up and said, nobody ever says that. I never hear somebody say, oh, I love truck drivers. And I said, well, my grandfather was a truck driver. He taught me respect for the road. He taught me how to drive. And he taught me to really understand everything that we consume, everything that is part of our, convenience of life. What changed from, hey, you have to source everything for yourself, was because of truck drivers and because of the interstate highway system, that you're now able to go to the supermarket and get fruits and vegetables that are out of season because of trucking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I asked what he was doing in Washington and why. I was assuming he was there to discuss things with some government agency. And he was a little cagey about it at first. And finally said, I need them to raise my damn taxes because the roads and the bridges are falling apart and I am responsible for the fleet, for the families that are sustained because of the work that my drivers are doing. And if the roads, which are the critical aspect of how we're able to get things from point A to point B, if the roads are about to fall out from under us, it impacts everything. And I had never heard it put quite that crystal clear. Like, I knew that potholes were an issue, and I always got mad living in Los Angeles, watching how people in cars were disrespectful in how they were driving around trucks.
Yes,
and
they are.
It's horrible. So I joked with this gentleman and said, I find myself at times wanting to nudge cars over to the shoulder, take the driver out, and gently shake them by the shoulders and say, do you realize the thing you're in such a hurry to go and get at the store is being brought to the store by that truck you just cut off? And if you do that one time in the wrong moment, when a driver is checking gauges or communicating about something else, they don't see you. And that's not their fault. You're driving like an idiot.
Yep.
So, I joked with him about that and talked a little bit about the documentary that I was at the film festival to like celebrate and get some views around. And he said, we should continue this conversation, because maybe the thing that I'm passionate about and that means so much to you could lead to something else. So I walked away, went upstairs, put my bag in my room, came back down to the lobby quickly to try and find him and say, I think I have a way to make this a documentary. I think I have a way to share this story to a broader audience. And he gave me his card and he said, let's talk. That was Steve Williams from Maverick USA. And we kept these conversations up for a short amount of time. And I got a couple of my colleagues out in Los Angeles fired up about it, which was such a great genesis for this documentary, because all I said to the person that ended up being my co-director and co-producer was, it's an invisible industry. You don't know how much you rely upon trucking. You don't know how much the infrastructure of this country makes your life the way that it is.
It's very true.
And next week, now that I have said this to you, you're going to start realizing how many trucks you encounter in the course of a day. And she scoffed and was like, whatever. 3 days later, she called me and she said, they're everywhere. They're just appearing. They're everywhere. I said, yeah. Who do you think puts the gas at the gas station? Who do you think, it was a nuisance for you before, but now you're starting to realize this is a symbiotic relationship, and you need to respect how hard of a job this really is, and how we all need to be advocates to make the pathways that these trucks have to be on to get us the things that we need, quote unquote. It's a story that has to be told, because we need to lift the veil of invisibility for everybody. And MJ Miller at that point was like, I'm in. You're right. Let's do it. Let's tell this story.
So how long did it take for you to produce the documentary? You released it last year. Am I correct?
No. It's been an interesting journey. So I came up with the idea of it at that film festival in 2014.
Okay.
I worked on a little bit of a sales reel to try and build some funding opportunities, because you can't make a movie without paying the crew and renting the gear and traveling. Sure. So we made this sales reel, presented it to a bunch of different companies, got some backing, and that in and of itself is a bit of a dance, because the people that were ready to support getting this story told to the general public, this is not a movie for truck drivers. I want you to know that up front. This is a movie for everybody. Mm-hmm. And I've seen documentaries that really are kind of portraitures of people working in the industry, which those documentaries are wonderful, but it's not a slice of life that the rest of the public relates to. It's more of an insight into a person and a job they're passionate about. The story that we wanted to tell was the symbiotic relationship, to get people to understand that almost like having a healthy, responsible, well-staffed hospital near you is critical to your existence. Having a healthy infrastructure and an industry that people are compensated properly and where people are doing the job that needs to get done that you don't even realize is critical to your way of life. Mm-hmm. You need to realize that and be vocal about the support to make sure that way of life continues. So we started shooting it in 2015. Oh, sorry. As I was explaining to these companies, that's the story that we want to tell, but it is not your story. You don't get creative say. We will use your money and honor the documentary, and we'll show it to you, but you get no notes. You don't get to say, hey, I need my company's badge right here. And no. And several companies said, well, if we don't get creative say, you don't get our money. And I said, okay, got it. I hope you enjoy the film when it comes out, but I'm going to move on, because the integrity for us as filmmakers was paramount. I didn't want to be in a conversation like this years down the line and have somebody say, well, yeah, but this is really propaganda for so-and-so, because it's not. It's, as a matter of fact, some of the companies that were kind enough to back the film were like, that's not really what we want. Sure. Sorry. But that's staying in. That's part of the story. Mm-hmm. So we were able to get backing, and we actually were able to start shooting in 2015.
Wow. That's actually pretty fast.
It's really fast. Yeah. It's really fast. But part of the reason it was so fast is because this was a story that everybody that we spoke to who had access to funds agreed needed to be told and wanted to be part of it. So we start editing it, and 2016 we get a deal with a distribution company. We get it up on Amazon Prime, and then the election happens. And suddenly, when there's a press conference about infrastructure that I'm really excited to start doing some social media around, I don't know if you remember that press conference on infrastructure. It was not making news about infrastructure. That is the press conference that President Trump said there were very fine people on both sides of the confrontation in Charlottesville. So the wind just got sucked out of our sails to be able to trumpet the movie and have this be a topic that people could find the bandwidth to talk about in terms of a government agency and priorities. Right. So last year, when the pandemic was, this is a terrible way to say it, but when it was in its infancy, when we didn't know quite what was going on or how long it was going to be, MJ and I made the decision to put the movie for free on YouTube, so that people who were stuck at home, who were binge watching things, who still wanted to feel like they were politically engaged, but were already burned out on COVID-19, had this as something that they could talk about, that was a bipartisan issue that you could talk about with anybody in your circle or in your family. This is one of the only topics that I can think of where people on both sides of the aisle aren't able to suddenly make it be about well, if you feel this way, I feel that way.
Sure.
You know?
Well, everybody has to drive. If they drive, they have to go places. They can't. How can they disagree?
Right. But even if you don't drive, we talk about innovating public transit. And,
sure.
You know, this isn't even if you are like, you know what, all I'm going to do from here on out is order packages from Amazon with a drone. We discuss that as well.
Yes, you do. You cover all the bases, really. You cover a wide variety of topics.
And you will hopefully at some point we'll be able to get MJ on with us as well. We're pretty funny people. We don't want to approach this with, you know, a heavily laden sense of drama, and let's laugh about it. Let's still inform, but let's have a good time while we're doing it.
Well, that maintains the interest, and people don't feel like they're being lectured to. They'll say, hey, you know, this makes sense. And I think humor is always a good way to approach things, too. Yeah.
And we were incredibly fortunate. We have this amazing post-production producer, Sandra Suchka. Our co-producer, Maggie Chifo, was brilliant. And another producer who also narrated is Yvette Nicole Brown, who was on the show Community, and she's doing a tremendous amount for Disney Plus. She was in the recent Lady and the Tramp. She's in the new television show Big Shots with John Stamos. And when I approached her about this idea, I showed her the footage of the bridge that fell in Minnesota. And she saw the school bus. And she was like, what do you need from me? Because if this film can help stop a school bus from falling into a river, I want in. So she's a huge advocate and managed to get a lot of press coverage for us. She's been on several different television shows talking about the film. And still, like when the infrastructure bill was being talked about in January and February, she was out there on social media with her, 750,000 followers saying, hey, you still haven't watched this yet. I know that you still haven't watched this. It's an hour. It's fun. Turn it on. Oh,
which is awesome to be able to have that and get that out there, because it's got to be talked about. And I think that we tend to ignore things if it is sight unseen until something happens, and that's not how you handle things. You cover so many topics. You cover them really well. It's very compelling. It's entertaining, and definitely worth the watch. We're actually featuring that on our website, by the way, Jennifer. So I saw
that.
People can just click and watch it. It's worth it, definitely. We're going to be back with more from Jennifer Clymer, who is going to be talking more about Be Prepared to Stop, an incredible documentary here on TNCRadio.LIVE and the Truckers Network radio show. Stay tuned for more coming up. Mental health is a topic that isn't addressed enough in the trucking industry. There are many articles, websites, and businesses that can help truck drivers live a healthy lifestyle. But what about mental health? Mental health issues are not uncommon in truck drivers. In fact, trucking poses several risk factors when it comes to mental health issues. Lack of sleep, loneliness, stressful work environment, lack of physical activity. Truck driving can be rewarding, but health issues such as sleep apnea, obesity, diabetes, and depression can result from the strains of the job. So how do drivers prevent these health issues? Stress is an unavoidable part of trucking. Trucking allows you to see beautiful parts of the country, but it also puts you in many stressful situations. Driving in traffic in unfamiliar cities creates stress on a driver. There's stress when you're not sure if you're going to be able to deliver your load on time. You also can become stressed when you're away from home for so long. As you can tell, there are plenty of stress triggers when you drive professionally for a living. One of the best ways to reduce stress is by learning how to handle it. I realize it's easier said than done. It takes time and self-discipline. Here are some examples of ways you can reduce stress as a truck driver. Listen to music or a podcast. Start eating healthy. Exercise or stretch. Talk with family and friends. Get good sleep. Plan your trip out. In addition to managing stress, there are other ways you can keep good mental health while on the road. Drivers often portray the image of being tough. Mental health is not a discussion that many truckers are going to have. Communicating your mental health struggles with friends and family, therapists, or other drivers is a good way to work through your mental health struggles. Here's some more ways you can stay mentally healthy when you're on the road. Stay in touch with loved ones. Establish a morning and night routine. Bring a pet on the road. Travel with your spouse. Consider team driving. Bring things on the road to keep you entertained, like a laptop, video games, or TV. Occasionally book a hotel room. It's nice to get out of your truck every once in a while. Mental health is just as important as physical health. Drivers need to prioritize their mental health and take the necessary steps needed to be mentally healthy. It all starts with communicating with someone you trust, managing stress, and taking time out of the day to do something nice for yourself. For more information on mental health in truck drivers, check out Common Mental Health Issues Truck Drivers Face on the truckersnetwork.net. Thanks for listening.
Enjoy the best in trucker-style music and comedy. Weeknights starting at 6 p.m. Central, 7 Eastern, right here on TNCRadio.LIVE.
You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kirk. We're talking with Jennifer Clymer, who is co-producer of the documentary Be Prepared to Stop. Jennifer, it's really amazing how quickly you were able to get this actually out in front of people. You had a lot of people who really were major advocates in the production of this. What has been the reaction you've gotten from people who've seen the documentary?
It's been very positive. We had it up for a limited amount of time on Amazon Prime, and we had, I think it was a 9.8 star review cumulatively. And we also were fortunate. We were sponsored by Earl Blumenhaus, to show the film at the Capitol. So,
Excellent.
Yeah, and that was really wonderful. We had people from Department of Transportation that were there, and a lot of assistant levels that came and watched the film, and the reaction was all very positive. And since putting it out there on YouTube, I'll tell you one reaction that was very interesting. We took it to OOIDA because we wanted their endorsement. And I went out to, right outside Kansas City and screened the film for the board. And the reaction was very mixed. There were a lot of positives, and there were some people that had specific points of view of some of the people that were in the film, because we wanted to offer a variety of voices.
Sure.
And ultimately, after a very heated conversation, they voted and they agreed to endorse the film because what one of the main people, Todd Spencer, spoke up and said, nobody is going to tell a one-sided story and have it be accepted by the masses. Right. So even though we don't agree with every piece of information that's in there, there's a lot of our voice in this film, and that matters. So we can either not support them and the word doesn't get out, or we do support them. And with that, you could see a bunch of heads around this giant, very intimidating boardroom, nodding, and I walked away with the endorsement. So,
excellent.
Yeah, that was really amazing, and a great validation that this wasn't, because one of the things that I had heard very specifically from one of the members of the board was, well, I see this company backed you guys, and what did they get for it? Like, nothing. Did you see anything except for a thank you at the end in the credits? Well, no. Yeah, exactly. They had no creative say.
Which lends credibility to your production, and that's essential. And I commend you for that.
Yeah. And it was not a very easy conversation, because, I tend to be a people pleaser. I don't know if you can tell that about me, Shelley.
I think you're very nice, but I think you're pretty darn assertive. You definitely stood up for yourself and said, no creative rights here.
Let me tell you one of the other reactions, and Tom, you're not going to have perspective on this, and I apologize, but Shelley, you're gonna feel me in this moment. Mm-hmm. MJ and I were on a local news show in Los Angeles that has a really wide viewership. Mm-hmm. And it was a pre-record, fortunately, because the interviewer at one point said to us, "Why would two women make this film?" Ooh. And, I paused for a second and I said, yeah, oh my God, why would we do that? That's ridiculous. And then MJ nudged me, because normally Tom will tell you, MJ's the troublemaker, not me. MJ nudged me and she said, look, women consume products, women drive. There are women driving truck. Yeah. This is an issue that matters to all of us. We want the grocery stores to be stocked. We want our children to not be on a school bus that gets, eaten up by a sinkhole or falls off of a bridge that's crumbled beneath them. Yeah. There are many reasons that it wouldn't matter what your gender is. This film needed to be made. Yeah. That question didn't make the cut for the broadcast.
I bet not.
Well, and I'm sitting here because I to let the audience know, actually, both MJ and Jennifer and I met and had a couple pretty extensive conversations, both before and during and after the Dallas Truck Show in 2016, was it?
Yeah, it was 2016 GATS.
So at the Dallas Truck Show, the Great American Truck Show, and we sat down and really, they were very kind and gave me an opportunity to ask them a lot of these questions. And the takeaway I came from this is, well, first of all, to the report, it goes, why wouldn't or why can't two women make a film about this? Mm-hmm. It's just like, I was just saying, going, really? They asked that question.
What century were they in to even ask a question like that?
About the 1700s, but that's a whole other conversation. But moving along, the thing that I remember from our conversation the most is, okay, there's some things I didn't agree with, because you do look at things such as like the future automation of trucking and autonomous trucking and a whole bunch of things. Yeah. But what I realize is this was a primer. This is, and I don't mean to sound insulting out here, this is infrastructure for dummies. Yeah. This is to get people to a point where they can have a conversation and to know at least enough about the basic issues to start knowing what questions to ask. So this is what I've always said to drivers and other friends. If you know something about transportation, okay, you may agree with this, you may not. But for that relative who doesn't and who doesn't understand why road taxes may need to go up or why we may need to change completely on its head how we do road taxes. Mm-hmm. This is a film that gives them the beginnings of an understanding. And it's not going to educate everybody 100%, but it's going to give you enough information to have a starting point.
Yeah, it's a conversation starter, which is what needs. It's so, well, you need it.
Yeah.
to go forward and solve the problem.
And you don't realize you're being educated, I think, till a few days after you've watched the film and you start hearing in the news about infrastructure, you start seeing different construction projects and things start clicking. Yeah. And that's why one reason why I like this. It's informative, you are being educated, but it doesn't feel like it. It doesn't feel like it's an hour.
I have a very dear friend who is extremely well connected in the entertainment industry. And she did me the favor of watching the film. Her husband is a film critic. And after she watched it, because we didn't have conventional distribution, she's like, I don't know if I can get my husband to, but I will tell you this. I have told friend after friend after friend, you have got to watch this because it changes how you drive. It changes how I no longer am fearful on the road when I'm next to a truck driver. I'm filled with respect that I didn't realize I needed. And to this day, she saw it 4.5 years ago. And to this day, she'll reach out to me, whether it's a text or an email, and she'll be like, I thanked a trucker today. And that's just her way of being like, it's still with me. Mm-hmm. And that matters. Because that's what we wanted to do. We didn't want to serve up answers on a silver platter because there is no one cure-all. It's going to take a massive effort, and we'll talk about the infrastructure bill coming up in a couple of minutes, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Because that's another conversation all by itself.
It is. But for me, this is exactly what you're saying. It's infrastructure for dummies. It's driving roads and bridges 101. And it's meant to give you, now, obviously, for the audience that we're talking to, it's a tool that you can present to others to start that conversation.
And that's super important. If you get people talking about it, it's top of mind. People are going to start saying, we really should do something here. And they're seeing a face to the occupation. It's personalizing it. All of it is so very important. And that's how change is made. Mm-hmm. So I commend you for doing all of that. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.LIVE. We're talking with Jennifer Clymer, who is the co-producer of the documentary Be Prepared to Stop. It's a very compelling documentary on the transportation and highway system in the United States, as well as trucking. And it's definitely worth a view. It's on our website, so you have no excuse.
I'm going to talk about pants next.
Okay, sounds
blog on TNCRadio.LIVE is brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. 4 things truck drivers need to know about motor truck cargo insurance. Motor truck cargo legal liability insurance, also referred to as cargo insurance, covers the loss or damage to the freight you're hauling. When hauling cargo, there's always a risk that it could be damaged or stolen. While there are no legal requirements to have cargo insurance, it is highly recommended to better protect yourself and the goods you're hauling. What is cargo insurance? Cargo insurance protects you from financial loss if the freight you're hauling gets damaged or lost. In the event of an accident, cargo insurance pays for the amount you're insured for only if the event is covered. Cargo damage resulting from collision, accidents, fire, and spoilage are examples of covered events in most cargo policies. Benefits of cargo insurance. When hauling cargo, someone's paying you to safely deliver someone's assets from point A to point B. The main benefit of motor truck cargo insurance is that you reduce financial loss if the cargo you're hauling gets damaged. Also, purchasing cargo insurance gives you a peace of mind knowing that you're covered if your cargo gets damaged. How is cargo premium determined? The motor truck cargo rate depends on the type of cargo you're hauling. The classifications include dry van freight, flatbed freight, refrigerated freight or reefer, autos, household goods mover, and hazmat. As there are many different cargo classifications for a motor carrier, discuss with your agent the type of freight you intend on hauling. Insurance carriers generally classify motor carriers with the highest commodities hauled. So even if you only intend to haul autos 5% of the time and 95% of the time flatbed freight, your premium will be based on an auto hauler. This is why it's so important to talk with your agent about everything you'll be hauling. This ensures that the policy is written the correct way and excludes nothing that you intend to haul. Nobody wants to be stuck with a cargo claim commodity that's not covered under their policy. Please note that the coverages, limits, and explanations of coverage as mentioned here can differ with every motor truck cargo policy, depending on the type of cargo hauled and carrier requirements. Please discuss what is included and what can be added on or endorsed to your policy or quote with your current agent. What limits are you required to carry? There are many factors that determine the cargo limit a motor carrier should carry. Unlike commercial auto liability, generally the shipper who owns the freight will provide you with a minimum limit required to haul a load for them, not the federal government. The standard limit of cargo insurance for general freight is $100,000, but this limit can differ. For example, if a carrier is an auto hauler, his cargo limit could be anywhere from $150,000 to $1 million depending on the number of autos hauled and the auto's conditions. This info blog was brought to you by the Truckers Network at app.thetruckersnetwork.net.
For the latest in traffic, weather, and information, catch the Morning Grind weekdays right here on TNCRadio.LIVE. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson with Tom Kirk. We're talking with Jennifer Clymer, who's co-producer of the documentary Be Prepared to Stop. Jennifer, before we went to break, you said you wanted to talk about pants?
Yes,
Okay.
because we were talking a little bit about how in the film we try and use humor and make things relevant. One of the things that we do is we talk about the fact that the gas tax hasn't been raised since 1993. And then we give you examples of things that what would things look like if they also hadn't changed since 1993. And it was Richard Gere and Cindy Crawford would still be the sexiest couple alive.
Okay.
And imagine if you hadn't gotten a raise since 1993. But there was one portion that MJ and I are co-producers and co-directors. So the writing, all of the different setups, we created all of that. And we were struggling with how to talk about the fact that the engineering from the 1950s for the roadways was solid engineering for the capacity that they were anticipating at that time.
Sure.
But now it's a totally different story. And some of the deaths that are experienced on the roads are because of poor engineering. And it's not poor engineering from 1950. It was solid engineering back then, but for the speed with which cars drive now, with the capacity that we've stuffed onto these roads, it is now poor engineering.
Right.
Lack of future proofing.
Well, and I don't even want to say that because they were good within the first 25 years of that. One of the things that is mentioned in the movie is every generation took on the responsibility to build new roadways. The current generation didn't feel the need. And that's why we're 25 years behind on the engineering and technology that we should be driving on right now. So instead of patching or repaving, we need to be using money to re-engineer and future-proof the existing road systems. One of the reasons we put Be Prepared to Stop on YouTube at the beginning of the pandemic was also because we really felt like now is the time. People are not on the roads. Yeah. Use this time with lower traffic to change, whether it's the striping, because we talk about that with the automated driving and cars. The Tesla cars that were supposed to be autonomous were using the painted stripes on the road as guidelines, and they were faulty. It was inconsistent. So that was one of the hurdles that they had. You can make an autonomous car, but they have to have something to use as the guideline to keep you in lane. But as we were setting up these different constructs and trying to think of fun ways to deliver the information, I just reread a blog post from a few years ago where I woke up one morning and thought, it's my genes. The way we can talk about the roads is you have a pair of jeans that you love, that you've used these jeans for years and years and years, and now they're worn and you want to save them. But sometimes it's not just about saving the jeans. Sometimes it's about losing the 15 pounds that you gained so that you can actually fit in the jeans. Yep. And I called MJ and said, it's jeans. I figured it out. That's how we tell this part of the story. She's like, you are insane. I don't know what kind of drugs you take, but start sharing. And, you know, when I talked through it with her, she's like, it's genius. That works for what we were trying to tell people. It makes it relatable and personable.
Great analogy. Yeah.
It was so much fun to watch Yvette narrate that part because she was like, I get it. Like, I have those jeans that I love and that I want to just put a patch on, but truly, sometimes it means I got to lose 5 pounds to make those jeans comfortable again.
Sure.
Not always the jeans' fault, is what we're trying to say.
You know, and that's a good way for people to start thinking about what really needs to be done. You know, that's what they're going to remember. And then they're going to go, yeah, we do really need to do something, don't we?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
you said you wanted to get our take on the infrastructure bill? I
really do. Okay. I really do.
Well, Tom is the one who's out there all the time. So I'm going to throw it your way, Tom. What is your opinion of the infrastructure bill?
Well, I think the first question is, and I'm going to answer your question, I want to ask you a question first, Jennifer.
Oh, boy.
How do you define infrastructure?
Oh, I knew this was coming.
We need to have the same terminology. Uh-huh. So how are you phrasing infrastructure for this discussion?
So here's what I will tell you. In my dream world, Be Prepared to Stop was the first in a series because I do think broadband is part of infrastructure. I work very closely with a charitable organization in Los Angeles that takes care of people all across the spectrum of the entertainment industry, the elderly, the very young, the people that are in physical and mental straits at any given time. And I know that in order for this country to have a healthy future, we have to make sure that we are taking care of the silver tsunami that's about to hit us. So I can stand next to everything in this can be part of our infrastructure to make a happy, healthy culture. I do also understand that there is a give and a take. So I'm open to having conversations about which of these things are not exactly like the other and need to have their own bill and their own, their own efforts put behind it. But I do think that infrastructure is more than what we covered in Be Prepared to Stop. How did I do? How'd I do?
We're reasonably close.
Okay.
And I look at infrastructure, and I'm going to be more of a purist, as anything that operates the day-to-day lives of Americans. So it could be roads, it could be plumbing, it could be electrical. I even will throw the broadband in there because I think with some of the technologies that are being talked about for the roads, that 5G broadband is critical.
Absolutely
to make it work.
Yep.
So when I stretch the definition, I can come up to around a trillion of what I consider to be infrastructure spending. When you're getting into some of the housing and the labor things, and if I really stretch myself, I can even throw the child care in there because of COVID messing up schools and a whole bunch of other things, and we need to get some of this stuff up and running. If it's meant to get projects up and running as fast as possible, there's a few things I can stretch the definition of. Mm-hmm. But I think when things like the PRO Act, as to what defines independent contractors, I think things such as the housing and stuff, I think those need to be separated and broken away. Because here's where I'm looking at it. When I was hearing the infrastructure plan, I hear that Secretary Pete was going to be the one spearheading a lot of this. I'm going, okay, there's going to be a lot of transportation. There might even possibly be some electrical or water. I wasn't expecting to see as much housing and other things in there. And I'm kind of going, wait a second. I'm driving, so I may have a couple of my numbers off. I think for critical infrastructure product on roads, they need $800 billion. Mm-hmm. We're seeing $400 billion. We need $2 trillion to get roads up to a bare minimum standard of where they should be. And when I start looking at this, I'm going, wait a second. If we define ourselves as strict infrastructure, it's approximately, I want to say, 5% is going to that. And that's where I started struggling with this. And a lot of the drivers I'm talking to are struggling with this. They might even be able to see the electrical because of some of the problems that Texas has had, or the water because of some of the problems that Flint and other cities has had. But when they start throwing in some of this other stuff in there, we're getting to a point where it's like, wait a second, the roads are literally crumbling. And we're not saying housing for our veterans, the elderly, making sure kids have this and that isn't important. But shouldn't that maybe be under HUD or another department? Yeah, and should this maybe be broken into a few separate bills? Mm-hmm. And a good friend of mine who's a school teacher, she teaches government at the high school level, but for college credit. She looks and says, this is not an infrastructure bill. This is a classic Christmas tree bill. You put something in it for everybody to hope that there's enough stuff in there that they'll get it to pass.
Yes.
But then it waters down the purpose, doesn't it? It isn't focused enough.
But there are two sides to that argument. Yeah. For some people, the Christmas tree is about gathering everybody and linking hands and saying, let's get this done, because I don't care about all of this, but these four things truly matter, and I will sign on because this not only matters, but it will help the nation. So as I said at the beginning of this, I'm open to, a couple of those Christmas tree ornaments coming off and having their own special, group that backs it. But I do think it is an important part of the conversation. And all of these things, like the water in Flint still isn't taken care of. Right. And to not look at that as a warning for the rest of the country. That
it is. It's scary stuff.
It's scary. And to not look at the most valuable resource that we have in this country, which in my humble opinion are the kids that will then become the future leaders. Mm-hmm. And to say, well, maybe their water has a little bit of lead. Like, that's not that big of a deal, right? And sure, it was a pandemic and not everybody had the best internet, but the kids are okay. They're not. This gives us an opportunity to say, wow, we've just been through the worst time in this country in the last 100 years. Yeah. What do we do collectively to make tomorrow better? Watch, be prepared to stop.
Absolutely. It gets everybody talking, and that's the whole idea. Get that topic out there. Something's going to get done finally, which it really needs to be. We're talking with Jennifer Clymer, co-producer of the documentary Be Prepared to Stop. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. Stay tuned for more. Finding the right healthcare plan and insurance agent can be a challenge. Truck driving can be a dangerous job, and drivers expose themselves to unique health risks. Health insurance is an expensive but necessary expense for truck drivers. It helps protect them from unexpected high medical costs. Although truck drivers should have a health plan, many don't. Some trucking companies offer health plans for truck drivers, but if you're an owner-operator or an independent contractor, you might have to find your own health insurance policy. The Truckers Network proudly partners with the Health Plan Partner to help our members learn about the options they have for health insurance. The Health Plan Partner is dedicated to helping members of the Truckers Network find and learn about what's available to them in the marketplace. Since 1985, the Health Plan Partner has helped their clients figure out the health insurance maze we're in. Here are 6 tips from the Health Plan Partner for finding the right health plan and agent for truck drivers. Review your options with an experienced agent that specializes in health plans and can guide you in the right direction, even if it's not a plan they offer. Determine your budget. There are options for any budget, but the adage is true. You get what you pay for, so beware. Have a list of your doctors, medications, and any health history. Some plans do require a health history. Review your current plan annually if you have one to see if there are better options and rates available. Plans can change constantly. Have the plans explained to you in detail and ask a lot of questions and role-play various situations. Quite a few times we only find out what the plan doesn't cover when we need it. Again, find an agent you feel comfortable with. You need to be able to trust them and call for guidance and questions anytime. With over 25 years of experience, Health Plan Partner wants to help truckers find the right health insurance plan. Need a better driving job? Go to tncradio.live/driver-info. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.LIVE. I'm Shelley Johnson here with Tom Kirk, and we're talking with Jennifer Clymer, who's one of the co-producers of the documentary Be Prepared to Stop, which does a very, I would say, very compelling and entertaining job of conveying what's going on with our transportation and our highway system and everything else. You know, we were talking about the infrastructure bill. There's so much that we can discuss, and you can't cram it into like an hour, which is darn it. I've really enjoyed talking to you, Jennifer. And do you have any final thoughts? I mean, I think that you're getting people to talk about the conversation, which is super, super important.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure. It's nice to connect with Tom again, and delightful to meet you, Shelley. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Of course. So you can find Be Prepared to Stop on YouTube. You can also go to our website. It's at www.bepreparedtostop.org. Mm-hmm. And you can follow us on social media. It's at the letters BPTS, Be Prepared to Stop, at BPTS Doc. And that's on Instagram and Twitter. And, find us, follow us, tell us what you think. And we are very open to the negative reviews as well.
TNCRadio.LIVE, your commercial driver navigation station.
Hi, this is Tom Kelly, managing partner of IMSICO, LLC, doing business as TNCRadio.LIVE. The website TNCRadio.LIVE and any content or podcast related to the website are copyrights of IMSICO, LLC, copyright 2021. All rights reserved. Any redistribution or reproduction of all or any part of the contents in any form is prohibited other than the following. We welcome you to download and play the publicly available podcast and share with others for personal use. Please acknowledge TNCRadio.LIVE as the source of the material. You may not, except with our express written permission, distribute or commercially exploit the content. And while we endeavor to keep the information up to date and correct, we make no representations or warranties of any kind, expressed or implied, about the completeness, accuracy, reliability, suitability, or availability with respect to the website, the podcast, or the information, products, services, or related graphics contained on the website or podcast for any purpose. Any reliance you place on such information is therefore strictly at your own risk. For additional information, including details regarding monetization of this podcast, send email to podcasts@TNCRadio.LIVE.